Okay, David, I'm really pleased to meet you at last.
Yes.
I've been reading your works for a while, and so here we had the opportunity to meet. And so I'd like you to tell me about, in particular, the last event, which is your book. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so what motivated you to write it, why you put what you put in it. Tell me about it.
Yeah. Well, I had the really great fortune to work with Dr. Eli Goldratt the last few years of his life.
Yeah.
About 2005, he began asking me to come to work with him.
Yeah.
And in 2009, he really pressed the point, so I said, okay, I'll come to work with you. And then, so he had written, numerous books in his lifetime. The last being Isn't It Obvious,
yeah.
which I think he published in 2010.
Yes.
But he was working on a lot of other things that never got written into books.
Absolutely.
Or maybe he would write an article where he would mention some things, but I was really interested in the things that weren't in his books that I thought maybe I could share with people after he passed away. And so that was the genesis of it. The idea was to share some of the things that Dr. Goldratt was working on.
Okay.
But as time went on, and especially as I began to get closer to write the book and actually writing the book, my motivation changed because I was doing research on the book, and I was reading other books such as Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions.
Right.
And I began to realize that science itself was in jeopardy.
Okay.
And I wanted to, encourage people to use the thinking processes, to challenge assumptions, to face inconsistencies, and so forth. And then finally, the biggest motivation came along, and that was that two of my grandsons entered university, both in the sciences.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give them something that would help them to thrive in their careers.
Okay.
I really wanted them to be able to think clearly, because my observation was that there's always been resistance to new science or challenging of assumptions.
Yeah.
So I talked about that in the book, going back as far as Galileo and Copernicus.
Absolutely.
Who risked their lives
Yeah.
to speak against the status quo.
Yeah.
And as the internet age was progressing, I saw the same kind of walls closing in around acceptable science.
Yeah.
And I thought that, it really does take courage. Courage is a word that Goldratt used a number of times, and then as I was researching other great thinkers, I found some of them using the same word, courage. It takes courage to challenge assumptions,
Yeah.
to face inconsistencies,
Yeah.
And so I began to become, worried about the state of modern science, being that it would not move forward at the pace that it could because of the technology that was coming into play, the political and commercial pressures to say, this is the science, accept it, do not question it.
Yeah.
And so that became really the final motivation for the book, and I hope I did a good job at prompting, people to really have some courage and to start challenging assumptions. This is the only way we will progress. Because,
How would you, can you summarize what your recommendations are to improve the clarity of thinking?
You know, I really believe that Dr. Eli Goldratt, by the time he passed away, had left us a complete roadmap for thinking clearly that didn't leave anything out. This is the remarkable thing about it. I couldn't find any glaring omission to his method of thinking clearly. And so each of the things that he was working on, and each of the things that weren't in his books, like he never really laid out in his books the 4 pillars of TOC. Yeah. These came gradually, and the very last one came right before he died. Every situation can be substantially improved, and never say I know, came at the very end of his life. And but these 4 pillars are a great place to start in your journey to thinking clearly. Seek out the inherent simplicity in any situation. And this is not only in business situations. Mm-hmm. This is in situations of life, situations of community, situations of science. Seek out the inherent simplicity. And then realize that every conflict can be removed. And so, I talked a little bit about the evaporating cloud and how we look at conflicts through the cloud method and try to solve them. The next one was also extremely important, that is people are good. That people mostly, generally speaking, are all trying to do a good job. They're sincere in their beliefs, and that most people are not malevolent or troublemakers. And so really, and this is where I said, we're the 7 habits of highly effective people. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. If you seek first to understand, that's where you find out that people are good. You find out what their motivations are. You find out what their thinking is. And then you're better prepared, rather than to battle and to have a conflict with them over, this is my opinion, this is your opinion, is to have a dialogue and to really move forward maybe in both of your thinking. And so, and then, of course, never say I know. This has been the biggest one for me personally. I started to apply it into my consulting business, where every customer, new client that I approach, I try to wipe my assumptions away and start thinking, what is really happening here? Mm-hmm. And that I don't automatically know the solution. I can start by, I talk about the 4 concepts of flow in the book. So when I come into a new situation, I can really go through the 4 concepts of flow, and approach it that way, rather than saying, well, I this is a DBR situation, this is a CCPM situation, because what I'm finding is it's never that simple. Mm-hmm. So those applications might be used in the solution, but they're not the solution themselves. It's a more comprehensive solution. Mm-hmm. And so that's where you start. And then I started looking at some of Goldratt's assertions, like, you must be able to challenge basic assumptions, not the lesser assumptions, which are safe to challenge. Yeah. But you have to challenge basic assumptions, which are not sometimes safe to challenge. Yeah. People lose their careers these days over challenging basic assumptions.
Absolutely.
It was true 500 years ago, but I think with technology the way it is and politics the way it is even more dangerous to challenge basic assumptions. And it takes more courage. It's always taken courage. And I could be wrong. Maybe it takes the same amount of courage that it took 500 years ago. But it just seems to me to be more urgent at this time And so, and the courage to face inconsistencies, to really say, here's what I think the outcome should be. I have an inconsistency. There's a mystery here. Why isn't the intended result happening? And really analyze that. And then go back and adjust your thinking and adjust your solution. So, and then, another thing that he never really, he started to outline the 6 questions of technology in the book Necessary but Not Sufficient, but he never completed that.
That's right. Yeah.
And he did complete it in the audio book, Beyond the Goal.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I'm going to bring that into the book as well. And then just at the end of the book, there's just a few odds and ends about what works for me.
Yeah. The book is very impressive because you feel there's a lot of thought, preparation, and architecture. It's the opposite of improvisation. You feel you knew exactly what you wanted to do, and you said you were impressed by nothing's missing in what Eli's legacy is. And when I read the book, I thought, oh wow, there's a structure there.
It doesn't start out that way though. I mean, I use a transition tree when I'm going to write a book.
Yeah.
So I know the basic progression of the book, but it's in the research, and it was really in the research at looking at other great thinkers in history that brought out the completeness in the book. It's not me. It's I'm just the dwarf standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
And so I feel when I was satisfied when I completed the book that it did have that structure and completeness to it, but it didn't start that way.
Okay. I mean, it's. I know it's not easy to write a book that is impactful right from the beginning to the end and covers the subject correctly. It's impressive. So anyway, read the book. Okay, buy the book, read it. That's the more difficult part. It's highly recommended. It's nice and fresh and new, and we believe this clarity of thinking clearly is just more and more important as the world moves on. Okay, so I highly recommend it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to add that I don't consider myself the clear thinker that Eli Goldratt was yet, but I continue to work at it, and I think we can practice. We can practice to think clearly. We can stop and say, what's the conflict here, and so on. And so I strive to be a clear thinker. I don't claim that I am a clear thinker. I have moments of clarity.
That resonates a lot with me because I think I'm a very, very bad logical thinker, personally. Okay, and I know that in my journey, the first thing I had to discover, it sounds stupid, but the first thing I discovered was there was a huge difference between intelligence and logic. Right? You could have intelligence without any logic. And you could be an engineer. I'm an engineer in training, so I thought, it must be logical, right? I'm an engineer.
Right.
And you can be an engineer and not be logical at all. So I've been trained in improving my logical thinking, but I'm still pathetic at it. But at least I'm working on it. And as you say, the important thing is just to get better than you used to be.
Right.
And that will make a big difference. So it's a journey, and I see lots of people going through training in logical thinking, and it's fascinating to see the difference which they pick it up. Right, these guys was already logical and became much more logical in a half a day. This person is like myself, struggling and still trying to work it out, making mistakes and stuff. So it's the logic is inequitably distributed among us, and it's. I don't think everybody realizes, that the very logical people are fairly rare. Fact.
Yes. The other evolution of the book was that when I began to write it, I just wanted to report on what Eli Goldratt was working on, so it was mostly focused on the TOC community. But as I was writing it, I was thinking, I would really like people far beyond the TOC community to read this book, because what he was showing us has value for everyone.
Of course. Yeah, and I think you do a really good job. It's not it doesn't read as a theory of constraints book, really. It's all about thinking, which is an important subject, or at least that's what we think, right? Thinking is important. That's what we think. We'll stop there. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.